My name is David Lombardino, Editor-in-Chief of DLA Editors and Proofers, here today to give you our tips on preparing a successful MSPE. And this, of course, is going to relate specifically to candidates who are given the opportunity by their medical schools to help prepare the MSPE. And before I get into that, I want to discuss first a common question that comes up, which is whether the MSPE is better than the Dean's Letter. The Dean's Letter is something that, while still accepted, was replaced a few years ago by the MSPE. The MSPE is a lot more comprehensive, provides a lot more information and insight into the candidate. Now, most schools, if not all schools in the United States, have switched over to using the MSPE and no longer use the Dean's Letter. However, there are many medical schools outside the United States, particularly medical schools that do not generally send applicants to programs in the United States, that still use the Dean's Letter. The Dean's Letter is a lot simpler, it's a lot easier for them to prepare, but it also provides and includes a lot less information. If you have the opportunity to do so, find out whether your medical school provides a Dean's Letter or an MSPE and get them to prepare an MSPE for you. The MSPE will be a lot more comprehensive. It'll be a lot more interesting for your application than simply the Dean's Letter. And in many cases, medical schools will give candidates the opportunity to either review the MSPE before it's prepared, or before it's sent off, the final version, or actually to help in preparing it. And specifically when it comes to preparing the MSP or getting the help from the candidate, a lot of medical schools will ask the candidate to prepare what is known as the unique characteristics section. Now, some medical schools will ask for certain information for that unique characteristics section. They may ask for example, accomplishments that you had in high school, accomplishments that you had in college, accomplishments that you have outside of medical school. They may ask you to prepare a bio answering those questions that they then use for the unique characteristics section, or they may simply ask you directly to write your own unique characteristics section. In any case, the advice that we're going to give you in this video is our advice that we've developed over several years, 10 years now, of helping candidates apply for medical residency, and we know that this advice works. Now, when you think about the MSPE, you need to think about the fact that it plays a certain and specific role within the overall scope of your application. Of course, there is the application itself, where you list your experiences and your accomplishments in terms of what schools you've gone to, the dates of graduation, etc. Then you have your transcript, you have your letters of recommendation, you have your personal statement, and you have your MSPE. And so one thing that we always encourage our candidates to do when applying for medical residency is you consider the application as a whole, and then within that, the unique role each item is to play. And so we come to the MSPE. Now, the MSPE ideally will provide a breakdown of the rotations that you've completed in your medical school. And a step further, will even include reviews that you've received at the ends of each of those rotations. Now, in addition to that, of course, I mentioned earlier, is the unique characteristics section. Now, when you think of MSPE, I want you to think of what those letters stand for, which is Medical School Performance Evaluation. It is your medical school's evaluation of your performance while in medical school. And so the MSPE will include things like how you performed relative to the average student in the medical school and the average student in your class, in your graduating class. And so we'll help give residency programs, an indication of where you stand academically. Then you come to the unique characteristics section, because how you perform in your rotations, for example, or how you have performed academically does not always provide a complete picture of your time as a medical student, or what you've accomplished while being a medical student. For example, if you were valedictorian, or if you were president of your class, or more specifically, if you started a new club or a new volunteer organization. And the reason I say that more specifically is because there are other areas in the application, taking a view as a whole, where you can talk about things like being president or being valedictorian of your graduating class, but there are some areas, there are some items that you could accomplish while in medical school where there's not a clear place where else to include it in the application, and so the MSPE is perfectly suited for that. And so when we're talking about the unique characteristics, we're thinking about items that they don't generally have a place anywhere else in the application. Now, I'm not talking about letters of recommendation. There can be some overlap, and also overlap with the personal statement between what's provided in the unique characteristics section and what is described. Maybe one of your writers, your letters of recommendation writers, has talked about it in the letter, or maybe you discuss it in the personal statement. But when you're talking about the unique characteristics section, it needs to be limited in scope to what you did in medical school. And it also needs to be limited in scope to or limited in perspective to the medical school. So in other words, it needs to be, what you write in the unique characteristics section needs to be what the medical school has direct knowledge of, has seen you do. In other words, I mentioned earlier, starting a volunteer program while at the medical school, or maybe starting a study group for the USMLE tests. These are things that you do while in medical school as a medical school student that the medical school has direct knowledge of. And when I say the medical school, I mean it could be an attending physician, it could be, really anybody administratively in the program has direct knowledge of it, or it could be something where, say for example, medical staff at a hospital where you rotated gave an evaluation or reported back to the medical school something that you were doing, that you were accomplishing while in a rotation. That's okay too. In other words, within the scope of what the medical school can know, or the representatives of the medical school can know about your performance and what you've done specifically while in medical school. So, it does not include any accomplishments from high school, because that is not the scope of the MSPE. It doesn't matter if you were valedictorian in high school or if you won first prize for a science fair project. Those accomplishments, while maybe important to your application, do not fit within the purview of the MSPE. And so you need to look for other places to include those. Similarly, any accomplishments in college, any accomplishments before you started attending medical school. Also, any accomplishments that maybe you have done while in medical school, but not within the medical school environment. So let's say, for example, this may not happen, but you were working part-time at McDonald's and you were able to be promoted from, say, cashier to manager, and then you were employee of the month or something like, all of those accomplishments are accomplishments, and they may have taken place during the time that you were attending medical school, but those were not directly related. Those were not part of your performance in medical school. So when you're writing your description, I want you to keep those guidelines in mind. And remember, you don't necessarily have to write something in the unique characteristics section. Not everybody has something to write there. But if you do write something in the unique characteristics section, be specific and be concise. Do not use a lot of adjectives. Do not use a lot of adverbs. Do not go on for forever and ever about something. Get to the point, state it, and move on. And remember, if your medical school has asked you to write your own unique characteristics section, then you would want to write it as if you were a representative of the medical school. I hope that helps. We offer a full range of services for MSPEs, from proofreading to editing and feedback. Come check out what we have to offer at www.dlaeditors.com.